Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the yet unnamed podcast because we still haven't got a name for it. We should read them actually more, but
yes,
we'll get
right.
to that. This has been enough trouble as it is. Today, we want to talk about when you get a motorcycle, you have to fix that thing. Should you fix that thing yourself? Should you pay someone else to fix that? And there is a million other subjects this is going to weave into. We're aware of how this is going to go down. But the base point is if you get a bike, you can save a lot of money by fixing it yourself. How did we get to that point? Any advice we can give to people who want to do that, and just everything related to broken bikes and fixing them? Because we've both done lots of that. Jake does a lot more of that than I do. I also
I pretend.
talk rubbish and ride bikes. I've done a couple of build series, but I'm not as...
You definitely have. Oh, give yourself some credit. You have done a lot of that.
The DR series is the best one I've done. Because that was taking my DR down to the frame, stripping all the paint off, redoing it, and I resprayed it by hand with rattle cans, and it still looks good.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there too. Where it's like, do we were saying, should you learn when you get a motorcycle? Like, is that a good jumping off point? Like, maybe you've never wrenched on things in your life, and you're planning to get a motorcycle, and I think it's a good jumping off point. I think it's a time to start learning these things, which you will be able to apply to other things the more you do this. But I know. It's been it's very nice to know you can work on your own bike. Obviously, I've been to school, for those who know me, but even before that, and many other people, you don't have to have gone to a motorcycle tech school. I
Lots of people will
learned
tell
quite a
you.
bit before I went there.
I've had lots of people tell me, because I'm not a qualified mechanic, I shouldn't be working on my own bike. Some people have that mentality.
Look, I've worked with qualified mechanics. They're not all that smart. The school I went to, I kind of figured out if you just kept going, they would eventually give you a certificate. I can remember my last semester there, finishing up my degree, and the guy next to me is also finishing up his degree. And I'm like, he's a moron. I'm sorry, but that guy was a moron. So they kind of hand those things out.
So, I was saying, starting at the beginning, because you were saying about learning to wrench on other things, there's also the point of before, when I was a kid, and I think when you were a kid, we did use tools when we were younger. We would be, fixing your push bike, your bicycle, or your skateboard, or something. You knew what tools were, and you knew how to use them. I grew up on boats and around stuff like that, so it was natural to learn those things. I've noticed a lot of people aren't learning that, and I think that's a lot to do with why they're not trying to learn. But it's quite frustrating that people don't think they can learn.
Yeah, everything starts somewhere and mistakes can happen. But I think there's a particular fear of working on motorcycles. People think they're going to screw something up. And, I think this is also why sometimes your first motorcycle getting cheap, simpler
Chinese.
bike. You had a great experience. I think you learned so much.
Yeah, when we first got talking,
Spicy. Yeah,
I had a
Spicy was on this
125,
Chinese
and I was
bike.
I had a basic understanding, but I would have to. I call you like, is this right? And you were like, well, kind of.
There's a lot of kind of with that bike.
Kind of. Like, is this normal? And you're like, I don't know, but then that's not normal.
Yeah, I think there's also something. We might make ourselves sound old here. In my day. But I think growing up, I wrenched on a lot of stuff. That's what happened. We didn't call somebody every time something broke. We did learn to work on things, and it's not because we're just gritty handymen. It's like we just couldn't afford to call somebody every time something broke, and that really is true today. Just in general, outside of that, I watch my neighbors around me constantly spend silly money on things that if they just did. You have YouTube, right here. You're on it right now, everybody. Yep. You go, what's my problem? You type it into the little box up there, and you will probably find a solution. And if you're not sure if it's the right solution, just see if more than one person kind of concurs. Use your common sense, and you can do all kinds of stuff.
A really good example of that is that, okay, I've worked on other things, but I've never worked on tumble dryers. And our tumble dryer went wrong. So I looked up the model, found a video of someone replacing the heating element, went, well, that's easy, ordered the part, took it apart, put it together. Turns out I wouldn't even needed to watch the video because it's designed to be fixed. A lot of stuff is designed for you to take it apart and obviously fix it. And the difference between calling someone out to fix that and fixing it ourselves is like £5 for the element or something. And it's going to be what, £100 or wherever there's an American.
Okay, you never know. My brother's air conditioner went out. I don't want to go too far down this thing, but last summer his air conditioner goes out. Calls him up. I think they wanted 600. to come. They knew what the problem was because he was able to tell him over the phone, looking at something. And he said, "Hang on," and he looks it up. It's a $20 capacitor. And my brother knows how to mess with capacitors. You discharge them, and he just goes and buys the capacitor and puts it in. Oh, it was really funny, too, because the lady on the phone said, no, you have to get this special capacitor. It's a turbo capacitor.
Capacitor?
No, but I got the specs. I bought the same spec capacitor from an HVAC store. She's like, no, but you need this turbo capacitor. And he had to ask her, he goes, what does that mean? Do you know what turbo means? What is a turbo? This is just a name for something. It's a made-up name.
No, they don't come with this is a capacitor. This is the turbo version. This one's faster. This one goes to 11.
Yeah. So someone in the comments is now going to tell us what a turbo capacitor is and why my brother should have gotten that now. I look forward to reading that. That would be great.
There's lots of things like that because there is things you get that in motorcycles as well, which is something we can go back to because this is like to do in my early days. But you also have seen, I'm sure people have seen, like Lamborghinis these days. Oh, you want this little indicator? That's $700, and then they're like, wait a minute, it says Ford on it. That's a Ford Focus indicator.
$6 part.
Well, when I owned my first bike, which was a Chinese import 125, and this was early on. This is like 15 odd years ago when they were still very ropey. They were getting a lot better, but they were still really ropey.
They've come a long way, haven't they?
Yeah. But during that time, a lot of the reasons people said they couldn't find the parts is because they didn't understand that bike was the same as another bike that was the same as another bike by different overall names, but the model name's the same. So, I can't find this part for it. Well, then find it under that name.
I think sometimes too, isn't the part numbers the same?
Yes,
throughout
that's what I'm saying. The model numbers and the part numbers are the same. It's people search like, Honda whatever part. It's like looking for dust caps for a Harley.
Yeah, or it's like any of the models that are crossed over. Like my first car was a Mercury Cougar, also known as a Ford T-Bird. Slightly different like bumpers on it or some bodywork, but it's like same car. And sometimes, oddly enough, the Ford part was available, but not the Mercury. I was like, oh my god, it does not matter.
Okay, so if we're gonna let's try and help people with this. Let's start early on. So I have said a few times that when you're buying your first bike, I think, unless you have a load of money that you can guarantee you can go and spend someone else to fix your bike for you, you have to accept if you're on a budget, part of that budget has to be a basic toolkit. And
you should think about that like with your gear.
To learn. Yeah. It's like bike gear, basic toolkit. And in England, you could spend £100 and get a good kit that will last you for a long time. It'll have most of the tools. It won't have those specialist ones, which I think both you and I we've built our tools up as you've had a basic set, and then you're like, well, I could really do with that. So you go and buy it.
Yeah, what you got to do with those specialty tools too is you got to wait till you really need one, kind of do some research. Sometimes you don't have to buy the top level. Like if this is something you're going to use twice a year, you can get the more raw version of that tool sometimes. The one that people go, that's not it's not the Mako brand, which it's fine. But I think I feel like there's a lot. We're telling people, like a lot of people want to get into motorcycles and they're trying to budget and they're looking at a motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
And then you got they're probably thinking, well, I need like at least a helmet, right? No, you need a full set of gear. And great, now I got a budget for that. Now we're kind of saying, you got to buy some tools as well.
But I think
we might
it's about the same price as the helmet. You can buy.
Yeah, probably, but yeah, I think it's just being realistic with it. Like if you're looking at that and that's going to make it too tight, and you're like, I'll get the tools later. You certainly could, but maybe it's worth just holding off another couple paychecks. Try to, if you have this sitting there in the garage, it's going to be great. You're probably going to buy some kind of used bike.
Yeah, that was going to say, this is only really applicable if you're
coming out of it almost immediately. There's almost immediately going to be something you're going to have to be playing with and adjusting.
If you're buying a new bike under warranty, you don't need to worry about this to start with because you're not going to want to work on it yourself. It's going to want to go to them.
Yeah,
but if you are, I think there's
little things there though.
Yeah, there are. But I think as you were saying, if it's if you were saying if it was a second-hand bike, it's far more core that they're selling it for a reason. They've definitely not fixed every single thing that has ever gone wrong with it and then sold it on to you.
There's no doubt you'll be doing some little level of wrenching in there. I think. I tell this to people when they move out for the first time too. Go get you a set of tools. Now, obviously, get a motorcycle. Like here in America, you're probably buying a standard set of tools, unless you're buying a Harley. You're gonna need to go get some metric tools. Do not start forcing the wrong thing on there. Some of them you can get away with; they are very close. But typically, yes, you need to go get you some proper 6-point metric sockets and whatnot. You can still use the ratchets. All that still work. It's fine, but. You do need to kind of get a set of both in there. but yeah, I think it would be good to go ahead and consider that when you're getting a motorcycle. A handful of like basic tools like that.
I think it's just an acceptance of reality, which is if you own something, it has to be maintained. Yeah.
I know a lot of people probably will think too, well, I'm buying a Grom or some incredibly reliable bike for your first bike and it's not going to need any work. But I mean, I've had some of the most, like I've had a Grom, I've had some of these new bikes. You always have to throw a wrench on it every once in a while. In fact, I think I am wearing my old Grom shirt. Can't sell this anymore.
I can't sell this, it's not mine. I don't own that logo.
I love that shirt. If anybody knows what that is.
I'm not saying any more than that.
Yeah, just pause the screen if you don't know.
If you don't know, you don't know. Okay, so as you were saying, we might be scaring people a little bit. I don't want to put people off motorcycling because, like as you were saying, I've got to learn how to fix a bike as well as ride the bike. This seems like a lot. If the bike is in reasonable condition, you bought it from a dealer or something, I don't know. The actual jobs that you regularly need to do are, the chain adjustments, oil changes, coolant changes maybe, but that's not even that regular. And they're really
I think one of the big things, cables. Cables are always out of whack on these
getting
bikes.
Cables
too much
right.
slack, too much free play.
But my point is that those are some of the easiest jobs. I mean, I've done a video adjusting my chain on my XJ6. I think I did it from undoing the axle bolt, getting it adjusted and putting it back together. I think it was like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, and that's something when I started riding, I neglected that so much, and I bought chains and sprockets regularly because of it. And I just was like, it's just what you do. It was silly because it wasn't until I think I really went to motorcycle tech school. I was like, oh my God, why? And I started maintaining chains properly and found out, oh my God, they last 3 times to 4 times as long with simple maintenance. It's the adjusting the slack, cleaning them. Oh my God, I would never, you know what I would? I would just spray the chain down
with more.
And was like, just throw stuff on it. Don't worry about the grime and crap that's already on it.
There's a lot of people do that. And I mean, I will admit, in my early days too, I didn't do that. But in more recent years, now I'm not sure if anyone's going to agree with my technique, but mentioning this product won't annoy you. I douse the chain in WD-40 to really break down all the grease and then blast it out with a hose. Okay. Not pressure washer, just a hose. The amount of dirt that comes out from between the links, and that's what causes the stuck links. And if you cover a chain in grease, more stuff sticks to it. So
And I think we can say, like, I know that's really for some reason controversial, say WD-40 is a cleaner. I'm not saying as an oiler, but as a cleaner. And I want to say it was the Fortnite channel from Canada did a big test of all the things. And I think they concluded WD-40 was the best cleaner.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And I believe they tested all kinds of things. I love too because he really gets down in there. Like I'll sit there and I'll do stuff that makes people very nervous. I'll blast the chain down WD-40. Wipe it all down, and then you don't hold it close, but you take that power washer, you got to get a step back, and you spin that thing, and you hit it. Then you got to WD-40 again, because you most certainly have pushed some water in there, so we need to, what does WD-40 do? Water displacement, right? Water. So we need to do it again, and then it's a whole process. It has to like drip dry for like a whole day.
We do a very similar
method. But this is like when I've got horrible sand and grime deep into the chain.
Hang on, you don't just take the airline and blow the water out with the airline.
If I have cardboard down and I'm wearing pants I don't care about,
you care about your floors and stuff, don't you?
A little bit.
a little bit. There's a drop of grease on the floor.
Well, my house is like what, 4 years old? Your house is what, 100?
Oh, at least. No, I'm joking. It's 1950s.
I'm still trying right now.
Roughly the 50s, but yeah, our concrete has had several decades of oil stains from various cars over the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
When I get there, I'll be dead. But if I wasn't, I wouldn't care. Well, I'm just being realistic. How old am I? Can I live 50 more years? Maybe.
We might be immortal by this point.
No one needs to be immortal. Anyway, on that subject.
Okay, so we're saying basic. When I think we don't need to go. Do we want to talk about the basic tools people should get, or are there any?
I think the basic toolkits of the wrenches, the spanners, as you guys like to call them over there, your socket sets.
Yeah, because the socket sets I find they normally start around 6 mil and go up to about 20 odd, and you can get a ratchet with that, and that covers basically everything. You might not get.
Can we cover sockets. A quick rumor real quick while we're talking about that?
How?
and I think this would be relevant since you were just telling me about this. A chain breaking tool is a great tool to have. You still need something to grind rivets down. People think you can take a chain break tool to a direct chain and push the rivets through. You recently dealt with this. My brother one time argued this with me at my house. I said, do it, and I watched him break my chain tool, and he had to go buy me a new one.
I will put my hand up here and say, the first time do you remember I made those keychains? I bought a really strong chain tool and I thought it could do it, and it did do 3. It was a cheap chain. After that, broke the tool.
Well, here's the thing too. Even if it could do it, even if it's strong enough, you're usually trying to reuse, right?
Yes,
one of those
where in
sides.
my case it wasn't going back to a motorcycle.
Yeah,
I was hoping
but you
it
were
was
forcing this mushroom head through there,
and
through
it
the
pulls
roller.
the chain.
This is not good.
It's only pinned together by pressure, so it pulls it apart, and you end up with this scenario where the ends are like this, and that roller is not quite in the hole, and you kind of have to bend it, and it's always going to be a stuck link. Yeah, you
keychain is fine, but
yeah, no, because then it doesn't look nice, and that's the point. I used to have to make these nice to play with and stuff. So yeah,
so you have to grind them slightly
to remove them.
And this is where like one of the tools that's a little more higher dollar, but could be nice to get maybe as you need it. Something like a small Dremel tool is really good for that. In fact, I even have like several bigger grinders. I prefer the Dremel for just cutting the rivets down. What do you like? Do you like something different?
I use a 115 mil angle grinder, but because I've done the chain, I've literally, people aren't aware of this, I made motorcycle parts into metal art, and I also sold these keychains. I have literally cut up
bring it back.
hundreds of. I've split hundreds of chains, many chains down into 3 link segments. So I've done chain splits probably more than anyone on Earth, because no one else just does that continuously. But
oh God.
I forget how we got
working in a shop. I would take an angle grinder. Like if I was working in a shop and a chain and a sprocket kit came, I would put a rag over it so I don't throw sparks to it. Take an angle grinder and slam it into the chain and the sprocket, because the sprocket holds it. It just falls apart. Works. People get upset, but you go, no, this is all going in the trash, so it doesn't matter.
That was getting onto the reason why I wouldn't mind using an angle grinder, and even on shortening my own chains for my bike, I will use an angle grinder because I trust myself not to go too far. But people should be aware that your chain, if you go one link too far, you actually have to take the next one out again. So if you scuff over it, you're going to have to accept that's there. So
that's because you're trying to make you're trying to make the keychains. When you're actually cutting like extra links off a chain, you can totally scratch the outer surface, because that blank is going to get replaced with the one from the master.
No, I'm saying if you go one beyond, I know. You then have to nick the next one out to then rejoin it, because obviously you go from inner to outer to inner. So if you damage this one,
you'd have to be. I guess you'd have to be real. You'd have to be.
Hey, Jake. People are learning.
Mad hurry.
People are learning.
You're right, though. People are learning.
And it's easy to just go. What?
Yeah.
I think one of the other tools, the reason I'm saying is I hadn't ever thought about using a Dremel. I think that's a really good idea. It's much more controllable.
Well, and it's also slower. You get the head. You got to put a little more aggressive head on there. I like to wrap it in like a bag or something, so I'm not throwing sparks, because the chain's always kind of covered in that like almost cosmoline kind of stuff. So we don't want to throw the sparks. We try to even think about that. I try to throw the sparks the opposite direction, but wrap it just so we don't literally put a bunch of metal grime all over my new chain. And I just like to sit there with the Dremel and just work them back and forth. It'll almost look smoothed over. You won't see the rivets.
Yeah.
It'll look, it's one of those, almost like those cool invisible things where people put something in there and you can't see the seam. That's what your rivets will look like when you grind them down properly. It's just smooth. But I was going to say, here's a tool too that I think a lot of people are so scared of. Buy yourself, just get the cheap one off like Amazon, like $10. Get a multimeter.
Yes.
Now, initially, just do the simple things. You can look up videos on how to use these. It's not that complicated, but you want to set this thing in. The starting things you'll do is you're going to go to your bike. It's not going to start, right? This is going to happen at some point. You get to the battery, and you want to see what the voltage is across the battery. Yep. It's not a full-on battery tester, but that will tell you a lot. And then sometimes it'll even look good. Watch it while you hit the starter. Sometimes if that thing drops to like 5 volts or 7 volts, no, that's not like, because sometimes a battery that's dead still looks good till you hit that starter and it has this huge dip out in there. Yeah. But things like that are so helpful to know, because then you're going, oh, my bike doesn't start, and you're going, oh my God, it could be so many. You do that, you're pretty definitive it's now the battery, and those are fun things to learn about.
If you remember, I had a couple of very intermittent electrical issues on bikes, and multimeters have saved me every time, because you put them on. If you think it's a cable, you put it on both ends for continuity, and you wiggle it around, and if it starts beeping,
you're scaring people with the continuity, the old horseshoe on there.
Because that's the two settings that I use on multimeters. It's voltage and continuity, and that's
like use it as you need, and then you can watch. There'll be videos on how to do this on YouTube, and you can learn how to test, like for continuity. He's talking about basically you're trying to see if you have a connection, and. The cool thing is, with each of these little things we're talking about, you're going to build to your skill set, and it's so fun. I mean, even just buying a new tool, as long as I've been doing this, every once in a while I'll buy like some new tool, and you go, oh my gosh, now I know how to do this thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like you've added that to your thing. You'll sleep better, literally, because you go, I can do this thing now,
And it means... I'd say I do find a lot of people, when something breaks, they start freaking out, they get really upset, they get really angry, get anxious, and and I look at it and I'm just like, well, we can just fix it. Because I've always tried to fix what I can myself, because I've never been able to afford to pay someone else to fix it. So if I want it still, I've got to fix it.
Right.
And that has meant failures along the way.
That's a really good point, though, right? Like, you've saved a lot of things. Like, this goes beyond so many things. I've got things around my house, things I've built, things that people go, oh, that's really nice. Who did that for you? I built it myself. And they, oh, you just a handyman? You do this and that? I say, no, I did it because that's how I can have it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have it otherwise. I just put a flower bed outside that would probably cost me several $100s if I paid someone to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it cost me $75.
Not my own eyes, but it looks very nice.
Yeah, I showed you a picture of it. So, just the little things like that, though.
And the staircase you built a while ago, that wooden staircase.
Oh, there's a whole deck, yeah.
Yeah,
that would cost thousands.
I don't know how much you're going to go into that, but all I can say is I saw a staircase which Jake had put together, and it looked really nice. It looked overbuilt, which you purposely did, as you say, because if you're going to build it yourself, you're maybe not sure.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, so I just overbuilt it. It's very overbuilt. You could probably park a car on top of it.
From my understanding, a lot of engineers are like, oh, I think it's all right. Just put an extra 3% on, it's fine.
Yeah, just put another pillar in there. Yeah, it was basically a little deck that someone
I was very impressed by that, and I know that if that was built here, it would cost an absolute fortune, and I know how much wood costs over there at the moment. Anyway,
we were about $1,000 in material, but if you paid someone to build that same deck, it would have been probably $5,000 or so.
That's just ridiculous. And what? And then you look at it, it's like a wooden staircase, $5,000. What?
Yeah. So you'll have cooler things, is what we're trying to get at. I think here. Do you want cool things? Can you not afford cool things? I get it. I can't afford all the cool things I want either. Do it yourself. Let's think. What's another good jumping out? Like, what's a good thing to start with? People get into this. What was the first thing you would tell them if they're going, I want to wrench on my bike?
On a bike? Mm-hmm. Well, as you've said before, research the job. If it's, for instance, wheel bearings. There's a good example where very few people, for some reason, want to touch wheel bearings. But as you know, knowing the few tricks, they're easy. Or do you think this is too complicated for a starting point? Maybe changing sprockets. Because that's the most obvious
I think
one.
the
Or even
simplest thing, some of these simplest things can be like an oil change. I think an oil change is a very simple starting place. And it's something that costs a good chunk of change when you take it somewhere, that once you realize how simple they are to do, even on a bike like a DRZ with a little, with an oil tank, it's not that right though, you have one DRZ, I've had one.
There's a few little rules to it, like don't run the engine once you've drained the oil. Let it drain properly. Make sure you account for the extra oil if you change your oil filter. Change your oil filter.
Run it, once you get it all good, run it, kill it, let it settle. Let it settle again. It probably will be a little low.
There are brilliant videos out there. Generally, there are the videos that you can generalize with, and there will probably be videos specializing on. I don't know how good they'll be, because in the nicest way, both me and Jake agree in ways that a lot of the reason why we make some of the content to help people is because we've seen some that was less than helpful, you could say.
Yeah, like
I'm being nice. I'm trying.
I know you are. And like somebody, like I got asked to make one for my new bike that I bought. Well, I guess it's over a year old, 2 years old now, or whatever it was. I bought my CRF, and I bought that bike, and people said, "Oh, can you do an oil change video?" I was like, "Oh God, it's the same as the last version, the 250L. There's got to be a million videos." And so I did a quick search, and you're finding like 18-minute long videos on oil change and unedited.
Yeah, I would say that's unedited, isn't it? Because it takes about that.
Oh God! So I'd made a video that was like a minute and I think 18 seconds or something long.
Yep.
It's just quick style. You'll need this, and let's go. So yes, I realize that's tedious to look through when you're kind of getting into this, but you'll just have to wait for me and Spicy to have owned those bikes and made videos on them. We'll fix that for you.
The thing is, okay, other than things like the DR, which has got oil both in the frame and in the engine.
There's a few bikes like that.
There's a few, but generally these days, all the engine is in the oil, so it's a case of...
The engine's in the oil. I like it. Keep it that way.
It's
fine.
And it's a case of basically warm the engine, undo one bolt, all the oil comes out, you put the bolt back in,
90%
you
of
put
bikes,
oil
yes.
back in. They all work the same way. And
you got to do a filter, but yes.
Do a filter,
however that is, whether it's a screw-on one or a cartridge
and also,
or whatever. But yeah.
Don't stick a screwdriver through the side of your filter to undo it. It'll only make things worse and messier.
Sometimes you have to, though.
Have you? No, you can get the ones that
several times
with a ratchet end.
So sometimes, even with the stupid cap or the thing that grabs it from multiple points, the thing starts deforming and coming apart.
And then it just jump.
Yeah, and when it hits that point, the thing you have to be so careful of when you do this is how deep you put that screwdriver in. I've also literally had ones where I bang a screwdriver through, go to turn it, and just rips the screwdriver through because some lunatic has just hammered that filter on.
Hold on.
I'm surprised they don't leak when they do that because that usually pushes the seal out.
I will slightly disagree here. I made a video specifically talking about this. Every time an oil filter is too tight, people blame the last owner. I put an oil filter on my XJ6 by hand.
You can overdo it. Your hand can overdo it.
No, not like this. Not like this. Just a little, right?
Well, you're so strong.
It's stuck.
What are you, 6'10"?
Well, part of it is apparently the oil. The actual
stands up, he'll hit his head on the ceiling. This is a giant.
The rubber seal around it is designed to absorb oil and swell, and over time that can actually get physically stuck to the housing of the engine, depending on how that sticks on that bike. So
you were out there. You were mad. There was stuff in your way. It was your brother's fault or something. I don't know. You forced it on, and then you went upstairs and drank a 6-pack and screamed at your kids you don't have. I know this. You don't have kids. I'm making up an absurd scenario. So anyways, hey, look, I can't say nothing because you know what I did one time? I over-tightened a filter on an Acura Integra. Sorry, I'm going to a car here. And this is actually when I was going to motorcycle tech school. I'm on my way to school,
don't forget,
which was a 90-mile. This is a 90-mile round trip, so 45 miles each way. So I'm like a good ways from home. I'm out past Dallas. I'm driving along down on the big highways. I'm going along, and I don't remember how I saw it at first, but I saw a big plume of white smoke. And I said, some idiot's car's burning a lot of oil. And I looked about in the rear view. I said, wait a minute. Oh, God, it's me. So I got off the road. Luckily, there's a stick. I coasted it down, found somewhere to pull off into, popped the hood. There's oil all over the place, and I can't tell what's going on with it. I checked the dipstick, it's low. I topped the car back off with some gas station oil I bought at this gas station. And I'm like, all right, I fire it up and it's like oil's going everywhere. And I'm on the side or at this gas station. I don't have tools. Everything's covered in oil. So I can't tell what's wrong. I have to tow this thing all the way back, 40 something miles back. And it was something where I was in an apartment complex, so I just couldn't really mess with it. I ended up having to take it to a shop because it's covered in oil now, right? Mm-hmm. You power wash it off, and the end result was they said your oil filter was a bit too tight and it pushed the seal out a little bit. So didn't even have to replace it. Just pulled my filter off, wiped it, put it back on properly, filled the car with oil. I pay more for the tow than anything, and so I can even say, yes, I've done the same stupid thing. It's a long story to tell you.
If you learn, that's another thing I think people have to accept. And I'm sure you have messed things up in horrible, stupid, catastrophic ways.
To not scare people, the things I've screwed up, I think ultimately I've still more than saved money.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Learning things, sometimes these mistakes where you even cost you some money or like a great learning experience, you won't make that mistake again. I mean, God, I scratched a $600 rim one time doing a tire change. because one of the clamps was the wrong clamp out of the 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just so bizarre. Guess who checked those clamps really good every time after that?
Yeah, but then that's the thing.
Never made that mistake again.
To be the person to not make that mistake, you tend to have to make that mistake. Otherwise, it won't be so important to you. So that's why I say to people, because I do find a lot of people when they're learning to ride bikes or learning to fix things, if they get something wrong once, or if they can't solve it the first time, they really get disheartened. And as you know, when it comes to fixing things, sometimes it's a nightmare. You try this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and it's still not working. But as long as you keep that thing in your head of, well, I just have to work out the next thing. There is a way of fixing this, and I will find it.
Yeah, and I think you see, I do feel like people get to get themselves scared so easily with things, or they'll go to do something simple.
I mean, maybe when I was a kid, I did take things apart and try and fix them, but there were things that didn't matter if it didn't do it right. So this is a kind of problem. It's kind of, you always have to say to people, I'm going to get a motorcycle, right, go back in time to when you were a kid and start like learning how to fix stuff. But it's just the thing of looking at something and understanding. I think, well, this is the way I teach things. If you teach someone how something works, then they'll know how to fix it because they'll know why it's not working. Yeah,
that's actually what they did in school when I was in motorcycle tech school. Was not actually to teach you, like people say, oh, the carburetor is clogged up. How do I fix it? No, I'm going to teach you how the carburetor works intimately. That's how we were taught. And then what's so funny is that to watch the teacher, when they would teach you that, then kind of go through the process. Well, it's doing this. Okay, well, let's think about the diagnosing process. Well, let's think about it. What would cause it to do that? It all goes back to how it works, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're thinking and you go, okay, well, it's got to be because of this. And your teacher's just standing there going, mm-hmm. And then you're going, and then because of that, to fix it, I need to, and they're just kind of, like the sensei over there, like, yes, you have learned, little one, and they never actually taught you how to clean a carburetor or diagnose a carburetor. They just taught you intimate how a carburetor works. And for people in the UK watching it, I can't say this for America as much because they're not outlawed there, but don't worry, unless you're getting a second-hand old bike, you're not touching carburetors. It's fine. You don't have to clean them. Yeah, we only have the grandfathered in ones, but man, I have so many people.
Are they outlawed there? Can they sell cars?
No, you can still sell them.
Yeah,
we have grandfathered in things, and this is why the DRZ won't change. For people that cry about that, I know that's a whole other subject.
And it's why they're never coming back here.
Bikes like the DR650 still for sale, and the XR650L, and these bikes that still have a carburetor on them are still for sale because they never, as long as they never make a change about. The minute they make a change, outside of bold new graphics, they will have to bring the entire bike up to the current standards. Yes, the bold new graphics. Do you believe the company that makes my graphics? I'm sorry, this is a side note, but I don't know if they did this on purpose. I don't think they did. Their company's called Bold, and I don't think they did it on purpose because they're a bunch of KTM guys.
I feel like we really need to explain this. We get this is such right. Okay, so when the DRZ, 400 and all the other ones was sold, it first came out in 2000.
99 was the 2000. Off-road model, 2000.
Okay. I think the SM came out
2001, 2001, the S comes out.
Around that point, the DRZ.
2005, the SM, and then they don't make changes.
It came out. They didn't physically change the bike in the entire time, other than it would be, what was it, like colour changes and always written like this, bold new graphics, and now it's a complete meme.
Yeah, they actually ended up, I think they must have became self-aware at some point, and they took that down, but for years, it would be under features or under new on the tab.
Well, it would just say, new for 2023. Gold rims, bold new graphics.
Bold new graphics. And that's the funny thing, too, is they kept all they did was kept swapping different colored plastics, rims, seat colors, and then graphics. It would make different graphics. And at this point, it's almost a joke. Like, it's kind of funny to see what you like since we still sell it here. I wonder what combination of plastics, graphics, wheels, and seats they're gonna do this time. But they no longer put bold new graphics because we were always miming it. It was always a thing. People would even post. It would be like once a year on the different forum pages, Thumper Talk, whatever. Somebody, you could just look for the post. Someone would be like, "Did you guys hear about the new DRZ?" And you'd click on the thread, and it'd be like, "They're adding bold new graphics," and everybody would go along with it. I can't believe they finally did it.
They did. Son of a bitch actually did it.
That's crazy. Yeah. So
okay, well we've moved slightly away from where we were supposed to be. I think people. You do kind of need to learn how a motorcycle works to know how to fix it. But
Yeah, and,
if you like bikes, and you like your bike, you want to look after it. I mean, it came naturally to me. Like you'd always, it's like if I got a new push bike, it'd always be like tinkering with it and adding bits in and stuff.
I think the majority of people that watch us there's definitely people that commute on motorcycles for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people are into motorcycles because they're into motorcycles. And, it's like, there's probably plenty of people listening that maybe own a car. And that's just something they use to drive around. They don't have any interest in it other than to maybe keep it running. But the motorcycle, whether you are passionately into it or you are a commuter, both honestly still works. But yeah, I think it just is it's a part of owning that thing is to know how to do at least some level of wrenching on it. And it's not, I think how we're going into this whole thing of saving you money and this and that. There's times where your bike will do something, right? I think a lot of it's you're just instantly more aware of it than you are in a car. You're sitting on top of the engine.
Yeah.
And even the most reliable motorcycle in the world is modern day cars are insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost makes it hard for the people that want to argue about getting an electric car. Oh, because you won't have to do any maintenance. It's like, have you seen the modern cars?
Now I have made that video.
Anything.
I have talked about the maintenance differences, and yes, the reality is, I think most of it still stands because it can go wrong, but.
Yeah.
And the maintenance is more. But yes, I agree with you. Modern cars, for the way they seem to just go on and not have problems.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, modern bikes.
Ford,
modern 125s.
I've done nothing. Yeah. Some of those just commuter scooters too, I believe, are just dumb reliable now.
Well, they do.
But regardless, though, the even if you have the electric motors, there's just little things in there that I think are worth knowing. I think there's things you're riding around. What do you do when you notice your brake feels spongy out of nowhere, or you see oil running down the fork leg? That's going to happen. Forks have not, whether new tech, old tech. Forks end up leaking. They're just not as good as like a car's shock absorber up underneath the hub there.
Having had to replace fork seals a lot recently. I've basically had to do fork seals because I needed to, and then for some reason they didn't work and they leaked, and then I had to do them again, and then they worked this time, and I did nothing different in between. So it's just one of those things. Unfortunately, it happened with 2 bikes, and I still have to do the other one in the next couple of weeks.
And fortunately, too, a lot of the aftermarket fork seals are kind of iffy.
We've been on this, and you told me get OEMs. However, the ones that failed were OEMs.
Were OEMs, yeah.
But it may have been that when what happened was they had non-OEMs, and then COVID and all that happened, and they had to change suppliers to get new seals, and they basically then the one they sent me just did not fit in the fork. The outer didn't fit. So I said, look, it's way out. That's not close. Mm-hmm. They ordered in an OEM seal, measured it up to get new non-OEM seals, and then sent me those OEMs. Well, all it would have taken was a tech with a set of verniers to just go inside it and put a little cut into the wiper seal, and that's what could have happened. It's not their fault, not my fault, whatever. It happens.
Yeah.
I think you're saying about... Do you think people need to learn, like, because you were saying about with the brakes, for instance, like going squidgy, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got air bubbles in your airline. It could be that your suspension got lifted right up for some reason, and if you pump the brake, if the hose length change, have you ever had that? Where it's a bit soft and then you just have to pump it and it gets the pressure back?
I've also had weird things where even just a drop will somehow pop a bubble right through the master into the line, and you have to sit there and pump the brake. Where you've bike's fallen over, it's not necessarily that you've impacted something, like maybe just set outside for a second.
Hang on, was this on the DR with the brake line like this that you could never bleed
all
properly
my dual
unless
sports
you
have done it,
turn it?
all the dual sports.
I think it's
all the dual sports will do that.
What you're supposed to do is put the bike on a stand and then turn it around 360 degrees, and that way the air goes around.
Or just unbolt the brake. If you got that bad, hold it up for just a second, put it down, and it's usually fine. Or get the absurd vacuum bleeder if you have a compressor.
It's not absurd. I do brake fluid all the time, and that's a perfect example of one of those tools which once you have it, you will hate yourself for not buying it yet.
Yeah,
it
kind of requires a few things. So you have to have a compressor. I don't necessarily know if those little pancake compressors, do they have enough air for one of those? What size do you have? Huge, yeah. And mine's not huge. Mine's kind of a medium. It's like a 17-gallon one. So I wouldn't call that huge by any means. I know gallons, you're over gallons. What's that?
I can tell you it's about the size. It's about, so big. and about
Yes,
so long.
Oh yes, that tells me everything. You're also a giant for scale. Um, and I'm a little person apparently. That's what you like to tell me sometimes. I've got like no legs or something. It's the ongoing jokes that we have.
All I ever said was that you had, was it short legs and hairy hobbit feet? I don't know why I said this. I said
Well,
it.
I do have hairy hobbit feet.
Well, there we
that's
go then.
fair.
So there's always some truth.
Sure,
there.
I'm a hobbit. Okay.
Well, no, you're actually
and
no.
You're the king or whatever. I don't know.
No, please no. I don't want that job.
You don't want the king?
No.
You want to be the elf?
Sure.
I think if I could pick
Could
any
I be a
character,
tree?
I'd be Gimli.
I just want to sit in
Yeah,
the
be a
corner.
tree. I'll be Gimli because he's fun.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
I don't know what we're talking about.
Right. Okay, so our advice basically is, watch our videos and learn. And you can apply this to other things in your life.
Yeah, you can. I think. So I know we briefly talked about what the oil change stuff and the different jobs. Do you think people getting into chain adjustments is a good one? Because that's something I get, or at least at minimum, I think learning to clean and lubricate your chain is a big one. We can suggest to people.
Well, I would like to say I think most people do that, but I think you were right in the first instance that most people lube their chains. And then lube it again.
Slap a lot of lube on top of it.
A lot of lube and a lot of lube, no cleaning. Now, I will say, in the winter, I do this. This is something I do in the winter with my lives. I will not clean my chain the entire winter, and I will let it cover up in grease. And then it will look rusty and horrible and nasty. And then the first sign of spring, WD-40, clean it all out. Gold, shiny chain, not a spot of rust.
Looks good, doesn't it? Doesn't it look good? There's a funny thing, too, you'll find by keeping things like your chain good, keeping your brakes in good order. A lot of times brakes, I think we kind of briefly talked about, they get contaminated. Mm-hmm. People are used to cars and looking at the pad, like, oh, there's plenty of pad left there. Yeah. Motorcycles, you're almost never going to actually burn through that pad before something like it gets contaminated, it gets glazed over, something's going to happen. And the really bad thing that happens with bikes, too, just to go on this a little bit here, is that you will get used to riding your motorcycle's brakes, right?
Yes.
And the brakes will slowly decrease in power, and you will be unaware of it. And then somebody else will jump on your bike, or you'll jump on a different bike, and they, oh my God, these brakes were terrible. What were I thinking?
If there was a very famous instance of my DR brakes getting worse and worse, and me kind of knowing they weren't as good as they could have been, and then I jumped onto a BMW HP4 with 16 pot calipers and stuff. Nearly went off the front of the bike the first time I touched the brakes, then got used to them, then got back on my bike. The first corner we got to, thank God there was like a trail that went off because I went for the corner and didn't brake and just went straight through it. This is on video. There is a video of this happening. And that is completely down to exactly what you just said. You get used to it.
You know my buddy Fire Guy 24 there.
Yeah.
Back in my DRZ days, oh man, we're riding around one time and he wanted to jump on my DRZ for a minute in this lot. We're doing wheelies or something, big parking lot. And he comes up to me afterwards. He's like, dude, these are dangerous. It's like, what do you mean? He goes, your brakes are dangerous. It's like, no, they're not. He's like, get up to speed and try to stop for me quickly. And I was like, well, maybe they're a little bad. Like, no. Okay. Go bleed them out, put new pads on. Bike is terrifyingly good again. So, yeah, there's I think dog's barking. Sorry if you're hearing that. Yeah, he's a Chihuahua. There's no stopping him. So outside of brakes, chains, I think some lubricants there, some battery stuff. Again, the reason I think we're making a point to say this is that you will get more out of it as a motorcyclist. Mm-hmm. You're gonna get more out of the bikes you own. You're gonna save a lot of money in general, and I think it is something you need to kind of accept that bikes are a little more finicky in certain ways. They need a little more adjustments. Tire pressure is such a big thing. At your car, you can neglect it, whatever. Mm-hmm. Bike, you really want that tire pressure to be within a couple PSI of where it should be at. And I think so often when you see a bike, I was talking about rolling it around. With your brakes and your chains are in good shape, that's a big thing to me. If I go to move someone else's DRZ or something, some guy's DRZ, you go to roll it and you go, oh my God, why is this hard to roll? Mm-hmm. That chain's in terrible shape. The wheel bearings are probably 20 years old. The everything's rough on it. So that's a big one.
I'm sure yours was like mine, that you literally could put your hand on the rear seat and just push it like at arm's length.
Yeah. And on my bikes you can, and I've been fortunate to be able to do these jobs.
My XJ6 can't do that. It just weighs too much.
Yeah. Well, my FZ I can even roll it around fairly easy.
No, what I mean is literally with the DR, you can hold it up and push it forwards and backwards with one hand on the seat.
Because it's light.
Because it's so light and narrow.
It's very light. Yeah. Well, what about the 500? Isn't it like that?
Somewhere between the two. You
Between
can't,
the two.
you can't really hold it as easily. It's because it's
Yeah,
narrow.
what about this too? I think something that is neglected a lot is how often you see someone's bike, and it's just so grimy and dirty, and you wouldn't think of this as being a maintenance thing. People will wash it, they'll wash the outside, but this will not get, corrosion buildup, oxidation, rust, and so many of these things can literally be fixed with some like a product like Simple Green we have here in the U.S. Like it's like a degreaser that's not toxic, it's not corrosive. WD-40 if you also want to be fairly safe. Just these are products, obviously don't get them on your tires
And your brakes. And your brake pads.
You can sit there with that, some brushes. I think a toothbrush, not even say, people say, use an old toothbrush. No, toothbrushes are cheap. Go buy a pack of toothbrushes and throw them in. Throw some in your sink in the bathroom, and then throw one or two in your toolbox. And never mix these, of course. But you will keep your bike just cleaned up. A clean bike is a happy bike, right? No one's ever said that, but that's how I feel. And just keeping all this grime and stuff down. It's also when you do go to wrench on something, or if you do have to pay somebody, if your bike is filthy enough, you will get charged for that.
Yeah. I'm going to slightly disagree with you here, because when I took my DR apart, the pieces of the frame, which were greasy, were
not rusty.
Perfect. The places where I'd been able to clean it had gone rusty. And this is exactly what I was talking about with the chain in winter. People would say, it's going to get salt all over it, it's going to do this. And I'm like, there's a layer of grease there, but keeping the oxygen off it.
You're kind of doing the equivalent of filling your fuel tank. If you have a metal fuel tank, you would fill it up in the winter, and this keeps
the oxygen off of it.
Air. Yeah,
Just
then you
at the
won't
top.
get rust inside. Yeah, because you can't rust. It's full of, there's no air pocket in there. Not a big one, at least.
But I think there is a line between the two. There's also the things of, like, I've seen bikes that are really greasy and nasty, and you can see that they've been spraying more and more like chain lube on it. You're like, how long before that starts getting over to brake discs and just starts getting into places?
Yeah, you
got to
be careful with that. Okay, well, yeah, I'm not saying to excessively do it, and that you actually have to clean things off. Maybe that's why WD-40 is a great product then, right? Because you're talking about rust issues. If you've been always spraying and cleaning down with WD-40, you probably wouldn't have that rust. I swear, you could probably have bare steel as long as you're occasionally hitting it with a little bit of spray. It's not going to go rusty.
I mean, it's that sort of over here when it comes to like. We have very similar winters, really. Like, the amount of rain and stuff there is. Do they put salt on your roads?
No.
No, they do that.
Not this far south.
They do that here. Everywhere, and people are mad about it because it corrodes their cars. But there's a product that people use here a lot is ACF 50. Have you heard of that? ACF 50 is basically an aircraft grade corrosion inhibitor that can be used on every type of metal and rubber and all sorts of stuff like that.
Safe then.
And it lasts for months. It actually adheres, and you can get it in like spray cans. And it's very gloopy. It almost looks like cough syrup, actually. And you sort of let it spray it over and wipe it down. But you can also pay people to full on like valet your bike and then spray it with this protecting filter.
Does it always stay kind of like in a stickier state then?
No. It seems to
hardens?
I don't know if it hardens or what, but it definitely works.
Yeah.
You wipe it on, it smells nice. You wipe it off, and
So
people
products
swear by
products like that, at least around here, because I'll do things where I'll go, sometimes do these like little adventure ride things, and like a big part of our adventure rides is pretending we're doing something cool by riding down like logging roads and gravel roads. The talcum powder dust that picks up is so fine and gets into everywhere that anything that's got
grease,
like I've discovered with that the normal chain lubes I used to use, like I would use different ones, like right on my Deers or my Supermotos, whatever, I would use a type of chain lube that's more of like these almost like they're MX style ones, right? They're meant for dirt bikes, and they're actually going to almost be a little less tacky because they know you're going to be in conditions like that. Where street bike, I would use something that's almost a little more tacky, right?
Yeah, like a sticky
hold the lube
oil
on there. Well, the minute I turned my street bike into a DIY adventure bike, that went out the window because the first ride or two I went on where I was blasting down a road like that, your chain is just looks like a Cheeto, with this sand and dust on it, and then you're like, oh, that's no good. that's not doing anybody any help there. So,
are you using
I like the
driving?
MX style stuff. I just use that on everything now. I think it's I forget what exact brand it is, but it's one of the ones it says it's more for a dirt bike, right? I think it might even claim it's for non O-ring chains, which you have to lubricate all the time. So this kind of lube also probably slings off more. It doesn't stay there.
That's something I've heard, actually. I've heard people claim that you do not need to lubricate O-ring chains because the grease is in there and it's all protected.
So there's two parts to that, right? Because yes, there's grease. There's grease down in the rollers.
Should we explain what we're talking here? Do you think?
Okay, not
or do you
O-ring
think people are
chains,
gonna know?
which seal the grease in, right?
Basically,
They're all
in the where the pin goes and it does this on an
yeah,
O-ring
but
chain.
the roller
it has
itself is not lubricated.
No.
Because the roller itself is the same as a non-O-ring. You know that people. The
it's the internal corrosion.
they're down
trying
in there,
to-
yeah. So those rollers and the surface that they roll against is still just metal on metal. There's nothing in there. You pack some grease in there whenever you're putting the master link on, right? But I mean, you actually get down into both areas. The inner pin area where the whole link itself pivots, yes. But that little roller that rolls on top,
I don't know if that one's
is-
because it rolls. I don't think it has as much friction. I thought the idea was for the filled O-ring was to stop friction on
No,
the
it does-
inside,
it
which
doesn't, because,
reduces
you're
the
right,
amount that it
'cause-
stretches. Because, by the way, chains don't actually stretch; they just get longer. And you've got a thing about this. You taught me this.
well, I mean, they technically do as well.
they
Because
do
what
get
happens
longer,
is they do wear,
but
and
they do
and
not
they pull.
stretch.
Because people
They get
people are
tolerance
worried that the
gaps.
pitch or something changes. It's like the pitch doesn't actually change. You know what I'm saying? Like the
Yeah.
pitch is the same because that slinky effect it has will pull back too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole goofy thing, and then you're loading the thing goofy, and this is why you're really supposed to change chain and sprockets as sets. I do this.
I say that as a rule. If you're going to do
So-
your chain, change your sprockets. Because
My only thing where I don't always apply by this is that I have Supermoto dirt setups that I swap between regularly.
that is the only example that you.
Now I have like full blown dirt setup where I put a really big sprocket on the rear. In that case, I have a different dirt chain, but I run the same front sprocket regardless. I'm not changing that out every time. And then like I do have different, just a whole different sprocket, so I can quick swap it.
I mean, it's not a danger. It's just a longevity thing. I think you accept that
longevity
maybe
thing.
it won't last that long comparatively.
I'm accepting
It's
that
not a
because I don't
safety
want to
thing.
sit there
To be clear.
and change that out every time. I think I'm fine with that. Just to speed that
Okay,
process up.
yes, but you're in a very small minority of people who has four
I
wheels for
should
their
be.
motorcycle.
Everybody with Supermoto or dual sport should get both wheels.
I
It's the
looked at it;
best.
they were stupidly expensive, and then I decided
They are so expensive. It's unbelievable. Thank God I've been able to get like different sponsors to help cover these things because oh my God, they're a lot of money. Yeah, they really are. It is amazing though. Like, if you consider it like this, it's a lot of money. This is another subject. But think about this. If you could wrap your head around it, it also really depends on where you are and where you could ride it at. I don't think you would benefit that much from getting dirt wheels. Like you have these green lanes, and I think we've both talked about it. I think you actually have more fun riding them in Supermoto setup than you would in dual sport
because they
setup.
would be too easy.
Yeah, I've got a similar thing where there's some trails around my house that I often go hit Supermoto trim. People go, why don't you put the dirt wheels on? Because then you ride them all in a few minutes and they're over. Supermoto wheel makes it an adventure. But if you have the right stuff to ride and you consider the extra riding you get out of it by having both set of wheels, and then you look at the cost of a bike, I think it's worth it. There's a lot of people that buy over here, and it's just so silly. They buy a very specific trail bike, right?
Yeah.
This is not a street legal bike. They only take it out to the trails. And you get talking to them, and they'll see my bike like mine. They're like, oh, I'd love to have a street legal dual sport, but instead they have this, this KTM or this something that's just not the only off road. Mm-hmm. You go, oh, well, you should just get whatever, right? Well, no, I like to go to the off road park with it. Well, how often do you go? A really dedicated person might go twice a month, and that's not all year either. That's just during in a given year. Maybe a really dedicated person goes 10 times out there. Probably most people are going half that. And then you take to them, yeah, but if you had two sets of rims and you could take your dual sport and you could have, then you don't have, well, it's kind of heavy out there. Then this is the part where I really have to just, I roll my eyes so hard at that because it's like, is it that, like, okay, yeah, it's not a dedicated perfect bike for it. But also, is it really worth, like, I have two bikes. Is it the best at either thing? No. But it's with a little bit of wrenching to kind of bring it back into what we're talking about here. And
well, you are the specialist
that-
of taking a bike and making it do something it was not intended
it's
to
not
do.
even that, I want motorcycles. For me, I even if like I've got the space and money and everything for it, I really turn my nose up to very bikes that are very specified. What am I looking for?
Aimed at a certain thing.
Yeah,
Specialized.
I want my bikes to just almost uncomfortably to themselves flex and bend and be so many things. So
Well, this is
Supermotos and dual sports are so good for me. I love those.
They never used to have off-road motorcycles. They had motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
You just rode them off-road.
Isn't it kind of cool to watch back the old movies of the
Look at
guys?
Steve McQueen.
Yeah, and they also wrenched on their own bikes. just to make sure we're talking about what we're supposed to be talking about there.
Yeah, that's another thing, though. If you look at the days of old and the things they used to have to do just to maintain them, the things they had to understand compared to now.
Okay, you could say it like this. The modern motorcycle comes with this little toolkit, which is kind of a joke.
True.
It's usually under the seat. And then bikes back then, they'd have a pouch or two on the side, maybe a little box full of tools.
That they would be using regularly.
Yeah. Yes, they had to.
That's
and
another
you
thing.
won't have to do it
saying,
as
like, reliability
much.
of cars, bikes, as much as you were saying, yes, they do break more. They don't break nearly as much as old bikes nowadays.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't. But then often, and I think you and I get this in our community where we talk to people in Discord. So you should join our Discords.
And patrons, both of ours, separately.
Yes. They, talking to people in there, how often they have an issue that is so easily fixable with a little bit of wrenching, but they're so worried about it.
You just can't. You try and no, seriously, it's not that, and they just can't.
Seriously, it's not a big deal. And once you do it, you'll see. And I mean, I love that I think you've done the similar thing where we've talked people through these things, and then they're okay with it afterwards. And this is why you should join our Discord.
Because sometimes it's that first job is where you go, oh wait, I can do this. And then you'll learn the next job and you won't have the same fear. And if you join one of our patrons or Discords, there you find people who, and I should also say to be, open about, don't have to be a paid option. The owners groups can be very useful if you find someone who's had the same problem you had with your bike. But I will also add in with that, because of Thumper Talk's existence, a lot of the information will come from people who own a bike but know nothing about them, but will state that they do. And you're like, that's wrong. That is wrong. You know
what else you get too on there is you just get you sometimes have to put up with the forum pages and the Reddit things is very knowledgeable people. They're just complete a-holes.
Oh, completely. Like someone comes in and
they're annoyed to have to deal with you. It's like they're frustrated. Like you moron! How could you not know it was 4.62 decibel 3? Like, dude, chill out. Like, why didn't you search before you asked this question? Oh, okay.
This has been covered in this thread 6 times. Why didn't you?
Yeah, when you ask a question, someone just links the things.
But if you ask a question and then they just link it and go, oh, it's already been discussed. Here you go.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. When somebody links the thing where it says, let me Google that for you, it's like, you dick. It's a little bit much.
How many times have you replied to a comment with one of those links, though?
I have done that. I can't even say I haven't, but wasn't that the cool thing when that came to be?
Oh my God, it does it itself. It looks so real. They're hacking me.
But what about people, though, just one other quick thing I would bring up. There are people that will say to me, well, I can't really work on my own bike. I live in an apartment complex.
That is something I wanted to bring up earlier on, because a lot of the pushback I get when I say to people, look, learn to fix your own bike, is I have nowhere to do it. Now, I do understand that. If it was a case of, like what I did, if you do like your builds or something like that, the idea of being able to you'd have to either do it in a day, because you're doing it outside, or you'll have to keep it covered up or something. That, I understand the frustration with it.
And honestly, there's even certain apartment complexes that have rules against doing things like that.
What, like working on your own bike outside?
Yeah. Anything. I remember doing an apartment complex I lived in. I think when I first started talking, I was doing an oil change out there one day and they had him come say something to me about it.
The thing is, though, as much as I disagree with that, on the same side of it, I can see people starting work on a thing and then not doing anything to it, and then
they have reasons. It's been for places that have good reasons. They also, how many times has somebody just spilled oil everywhere? And
we don't care about it.
I'm out there with the cardboard.
This is the one thing in America: land of the free, spill oil on the floor. Oh! Here, people are... This, I didn't know about this whole, there's oil on the floor.
But I know.
It's slippery, isn't it?
But you guys have more, what's it called, don't you, out there? I'm sure you guys doing more like what we call blacktop. I think you gugot tarmac and stuff.
It's
made of oil. Who cares? We have a lot of concrete.
I don't mean on the road. I'm talking about on concrete driveways. I've never understood being
also,
I've never owned a fresh concrete floor though, so I can actually say I probably can understand.
I live at a house with a driveway in the front. This is how they build them all now, which I don't like as much. I wish we still had houses with alleyways and garages in the back, because if you had a stain in your garage behind your house on the floor, I don't think people would care as much. But if I stain in front of my house, the driveway, that you see when you walk up to my house.
Oh, Jake, do
That's
you know,
gonna annoy me.
if I walked up to your house and, if I flew all the way to America after all these years and I come to your house and I saw an oil stain on the flat drive, I'm going home. I'm just... It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I'm sure it doesn't.
But I do understand it at the same time.
Well, this is also really easily avoidable. It's called cardboard.
Yes.
You guys, all of us nowadays are buying things on Amazon, right? Save a few of those boxes. Always keep a few on hand. Shove them anytime you're doing something messy, even if it's on your floor you don't care about. Just shove a few under there.
If you're ever doing any woodwork projects and you have a lot of sawdust, put it in a carrier bag. We once had to chop up a load of wood and there was piles of sawdust on the floor. So I just piled it into a carrier bag, and every time I spilt any oil, pile of sawdust on top of it, and it will absorb overnight all of the oil, and then you just brush. Yeah.
Just wicks it, huh?
Yeah, if you put a pile on it, normally if you put like sand on it, it's only going to get into the first bit, and then you have to keep scrubbing. If you put nice fluffy dry sawdust on top of it, a good like inch, it will suck it up through all of that, and the next day it will look homogeneously the same colour, and you can just sweep it away, and it will suck it out of concrete.
You know what's really obnoxious is when you spill coolant because it won't evaporate. Like if you have some it's wet and you kind of wipe it. Like if you spill coolant and you take a rag and you wipe it, right? Well, you wipe it, right? And there's those little streaks, that you see, and you go, that's fine. That little bit will dry, which you would do if it was water on like a hard floor, and you'd wipe it. Oh, that little streak, it'll dry on its own. The coolant, I mean, maybe eventually it will. It probably would become like maybe sticky or something, but like days later on a polished concrete floor like I have in my garage, no, that coolant will be right where you left it. It will not move.
I did not know that. Yeah, I guess that's because of the glycols and stuff in it rather than
well, because it's designed not to evaporate like that.
Well,
that would be a problem.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's designed.
It would be a bit of a problem if it evaporated in normal temperatures. It would just be smoky. But you'd be all riding around with steam engines, just blowing smoke everywhere. Maybe we'll have to go back to that. Wow. So now that we've scared everybody out of riding because we've told them they have to buy tools as well.
I think this is the point, though, is to say that it isn't actually that bad. No,
it's not.
And if you are terrified, don't worry about it. This is we're talking about. You're going back slightly to the whole thing of if you don't have anywhere to work. Now, this doesn't exist much in the UK, but I understand that in America there are maker spaces or like garages that you can rent a bay for a day, and they may even have tools and someone there who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with that, but that is a thing that's popping up here and there. God, I think Shade Tree Surgeon, remember him? I think he is a part of one of those or something really cool. Yeah, I
thought it would be a great business if you had to buy a small place, if you had like 4 or 5 bays with some basic tools there, and you could just chill out and people can come down and use the tools. And if you got something knowledgeable, I think it would build a whole community around it. It would be a really cool little hub of like...
It would be, yeah.
But it needs someone to pay the rent for the building.
Probably needs someone there too.
Yes, that's the thing.
You know what you need? You're going to need the tools behind the counter where you have to go get them with a cage.
This is the problem, though. You're going to need
that way people have a membership and they have to return the tools.
I think each bay has its own set of tools, basic tools, and they will have boards and they go back on there. And if people sign in,
they're not necessarily in drawers. I mean, some things will have to be. We tried it. Everything's there,
drawn around.
Yes.
So
we can go and look. Where's the number 10?
And you'll know in between.
The number 10 is somewhere in my vehicle. Well, you have to buy another one, and that's just going to be a common thing. Yeah.
But then I mean, I use Halfords. You don't know what Halfords is.
Which is also...
But Halfords Professional in the UK is just a generalised store. They do good quality tools, which have got a lifetime guarantee on them. I use those.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's similar things we have here. Used to be you'd have to go with like Craftsman and stuff, but I mean, even nowadays we have like Lowe's and stuff here. I know you can go get the Lowe's brand tools. And the thing to do is you have to keep your receipt. So what you do is you get an account there, which is like really easy to do, and then it stores it there for you. And you just walk in and say this broke, and you go get another one. So yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's really cool that you can do that with certain brands like that because they're like the Lowe's ones, for instance, are almost like an off-brand tool. They're cheaper. Well, that way, who cares if they're cheaper and they break? If it's got a warranty. The whole selling point of Snap-on was Snap-off was the fact that people are like, oh yes, they're great tools and they replace them if they break. But as I say, literally, it's like here is a Snap-on spanner for $100. Here's one from my local place, a set of 4 for $10.
Still lifetime guarantee. Still made of steel. Still don't break when you use them.
Somebody will say though, oh, but you get the tighter ratcheting out of it.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
you will
they
get
have
those
a point.
things, but you need to get something
I have
for the
some
extra
quality
money.
tools. I've got a few of the really high end ones, and there's sometimes you'll find places where you say, yeah, I'm using this enough. This is worth investing. But often enough, at least starting out, you don't have to have, you'll be just fine with the normal set of tools. And the normal jobs you're going to be doing. You're not going to be putting cams in day one. And that's things like I got my channel. We've done deep. I literally just big board this motorcycle and we put a ported head. We did all this stuff. But obviously, it's like, what's crazy when I get riders or people that talk to me, usually it's in the Discord or something. They say, yeah, I just bought that bike. It's my first bike. I've been watching your series. And do you think I need a big bore and do all this?
No.
You almost feel the fear in their voice talking about it. I'm like, God, no, this is just like if you want to. And, yes, if you did every job I showed and built your way up to that, by the time you get there, you might actually be okay with doing something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, we dig into it. People will see the video of mine and they'll watch a brand new motorcycle after ripping all this. I can't believe you did it to a brand new motorcycle. But I'm telling you, this is not because Jake's a motorcycle mechanic. This is literally level stuff that if you do a little bit of stuff, you start building your skill set up, you'll realize these are just bolts we took out and they're going to go back, take pictures. The big thing is just remember where everything goes.
Yeah, I don't think Chase will be too offended if we bring up ye oldie. Chase took a bike apart, put all the nuts and bolts. No, he put all the nuts and bolts into a bucket.
That's right, he did do that. Yeah, don't do that.
No, pieces of
Ziploc bags are always good.
Ziploc bags for each things.
Writing
Piece of cardboard with it stuck through.
Or I know we've shown that before.
Put it back in the hole it came out of, if you can.
Yeah, that's kind of a frowned upon thing for some reason in the wrenching world, but I've done it a bunch. Especially if it's like a cover or something, like you're not going to not know where those bolts are because I
don't mean things like, I mean like fairing bolts, for instance. They don't get in the way of anything else. They're just there.
No, that would be another one. You go to put that fairing on, why won't it go? Oh, because the bolt's here, which I need now.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't say like the side of the engine. That I'd use a piece of cardboard so I had the right lengths and everything was just like there. But
the thing you do with that is you take your new gasket and you use that to make a template with.
Just don't get it backwards. Don't get it backwards.
Yeah, don't do it backwards. And then you'll put all the bolts. That's the silly little things that these bolts are different lengths. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
And so if you shove a short one into a long hole, if it catches threads, you might not even be aware of it.
Or you might strip out just the end threads.
If you get just the tip, that's a problem. The problem is you go to put the long bolt, and sometimes it's a couple threads too long. And what's the big deal? We'll all know, bottom out. Some of those have so much thread on them. You're on a steel bolt going into an aluminum case. With ease, I've seen people push those right through an engine.
Didn't you have
I had a bike with this
that had a sealant on the back of one of the holes, or it leaked if you undid it?
WR450 that I had, one of these sprocket cover bolts, one of the sprocket cover holders there, what somebody had done, and this is another thing, do not... First of all, they'd done a Supermoto kit, right? Mm-hmm. So they wanted to put a bigger front sprocket on the front. Well, when they put that bigger front sprocket, the case saver wouldn't fit. Now, here's the thing. You really should always try to run those case savers, too. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's like slightly, even if you have to, you slightly grind them slightly. Yeah. Make those fit if you can. Okay, but they decide not to run it. Well, they put the bolts in that held the cover on, but now without that piece in there, which made the bolts slightly too long.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this. I bought the bike. It seemed fine. As long as that bolt was in there, it wasn't leaking. I had that cover off and I was checking something. And I started the engine and oil started shooting from that hole. Not like under pressure, but like because it's getting churned up.
Oh, that's ruined it. In my mind, it was like going and like hitting the wall. It's on the concrete.
I mean, it did look like a vein had been split. It was sort of scary.
Arterial.
And of course, at that point, what do I do? And at the point that I figured it out, too, I had already put a couple 100 miles on that bike. So I knew that the little chunk of metal hadn't fallen off into the motor and caught in something. But it was a scary thing because I thought, God, what do I do? I split the whole case? That would be the way to fix it, is split the case, bring it to an aluminum welder, and he'd have to repair it. So I kind of rolled the dice there. I said, it's gone a while already. Seems okay. So for good measure, when I went to put that, even though it had been leaking through that bolt, I did put, I think I put a little bit of Teflon and maybe even an O-ring. Mm-hmm. Or I got one of those little copper, I got one of those copper washers like you would see on a at the bottom of a water pump. Yeah, a little crush washer. Yeah. Put that in there. And then that was just a common thing. If I ever took the sprocket off the front, I had to replace that little washer and redo the stuff. And it was never a problem.
Yeah, the thing is, some people would see that, I would say on the internet, they'll see something like that and they're like, that's so janky. And it's like, no, it's not. That solves the problem. That
solves the problem. Speaking of janky repairs like that aren't janky.
Silly.
I'll bring a story about my brother about this. He buys a DRZ. Not long after owning it, he's telling me he's got some kind of oil leak by the front sprocket. I'm thinking he's got the common DRZ thing where the nuts backed off. No, that's not what it is. He's telling me it's actually weeping out of the case. And he's on the phone with me. He's wiping the case off. And he's like, there's something on here. Somebody had put some kind of RTV or something across the case there. And he couldn't tell originally because it's right where the sprocket is. It's always a little grimy right there. So he wipes it off. He sees that. He peels it off. And there's a pinhole in the motor right there, right in front of where the sprocket goes, the chain goes around. And he is losing he's so angry. And I'm going, no, this is fine. You're telling me it's a really small hole. He sends me a picture of it. It's a small little hole. Probably either the chain flings something or maybe somebody didn't have the case saver at one point. But usually that's a lot bigger damage. Yeah. Something has hit the case right there. I said, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to clean the area really good. He's like, I said, you might even want to rough up the smoother part around it just a little bit. You know, where
this is going. I know where this is going.
Go get you some, if you want to get really nice, I say go get some of the marine grade JB Weld, and you're going to just put a little dab over it. And once it dries, you can even sand it if you want. And he is so mad at me. He thinks I'm messing with him. This isn't funny. This is how I get to work. It's broken. I'm like, it's not broken. It's not broken. He will admittedly, my brother he'll tell you, he can get very heated over things, and I had to talk him down and tell him I'm not kidding you. This is like the repair.
Without going into saying anything, I can understand why his mind is do it by the book.
Yep.
Or what seems.
And I told him, I said, well, the thing is, it was going to be not even the first case. It's like the more bigger. It's not splitting the case. That's still a piece I believe that can come off. I could be wrong actually. No, where that hole was may actually be case half. It may be a case half, so it would have been full motor splitting. And there's times where that's just, you don't need to. Don't force JB Weld into the hole.
Was this on a DR as well?
DRZ 400.
That's a magnesium casing though, isn't it? You can't weld that.
I don't know if it's the case or if it's the inner. I'd have to go look at it again.
I thought the whole engine casing, everything on the DR was a magnesium engine.
I believe it's just aluminum. I think it's just the outside ones that are magnesium. I don't think they make the big cases like that out of magnesium. I think those have to be aluminum. So anyway, regardless, I think it would have required him splitting the engine to fix it. And it was like, nah, you'll be all right. And that is like you got to be careful with it. You got to always be careful with any cover, anything, if you're forcing it in there. That's another thing too, why we're throwing general random information out there. If you're ever putting sealant around a case you're about to put on, if you put it on to the point when you put it on, you see a big amount squish out on the outside, people don't think about it. They go, it's fine, I wiped that off. That same amount just squished into the inside. Yeah. Ideally, when you put these cases on with sealant, it should not be doing that. Or if it does the tiniest line,
it should expand and stop before it gets to the end. Or
yeah, typically too, people too, they like to leave the bead. You don't do that. You need to take your finger, run it along, and you need to sort of smooth it all out. It needs to be this thing. But yeah, people love to just, I guess for certain things, like
bigger the gob, better the job.
I guess if you give it like a week to fully dry in there.
I think the other day someone tried to make out that if you put RVT, is it RVT or RTV? RTV.
Room temperature
I know. I always say RVT.
Yeah. I have to think of it like that because I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, RTV. me too. So you know.
Yeah.
Someone said that if you put too much of that between the case halves, that when you crank it down, it can crack the housing. And they tried to show this. Hang on. By the, if you have a nut into a socket, so you've got it looks like a tube. One side looks like a tube. It's in the casing. And if you overdo it, that side always pops off.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? If I think on a casing, you've got a hole. One side of the hole is fully within the casing. And on the other side of it, it's just got the bump, which is a bit of wall of metal and then the threads.
You're talking about the dowels.
No, but you've got a bolt going through.
A bolt going through. Okay.
It's just a bolt hole that kind of looks like it's a pole melted in.
Well, you don't put it in there.
No. This is my point. Someone tried to claim that by putting that in there, it had caused it to blow out the side of the bolt hole. No, they just overdone it.
They overdid it then. Yeah. There is a goofy thing with so like certain bolts when you're bolting them down certain nuts. usually this will be specified. These are usually big internal ones that you need to grease or oil the threads to get proper torque. But by no means does this mean and you put it there, because you can hydrolock them.
Oh, the
you
hole.
can actually come down to torque, and then you can blow out the you can crack the so it's probably the person told you that. Probably one, they just overdid it. But I could see where the thinking, if you knew that, and then maybe also. But no, you're talking about two surfaces that are flat, that have place for things to go. Maybe if you put the RTV on and then waited a week to put the two caps together and now it's fully dry, maybe that could happen. But
I don't think
you should be okay.
Yeah, it was just I think we're going a little bit off the tangent of basic stuff, and we're trying not to terrify new people as we talk about hydrolocking bolts in the bottom of bolt holes. But this
You're
is
not
what
doing this. You're not doing this.
This is what happens is that
buy a torque wrench too and learn how to use it.
1,000%.
I've been meaning to say that.
Yeah, 1,000%. And the right sized one. And don't get foot pounds and Newton meters confused, because we've seen
they're
that
on
go
both.
wrong.
They're usually on both. The ones you get over here, stick with which one measure you're looking at and don't mix them.
Also, I will say this: don't use figures from one model of bike on another model of bike, because I nearly made a mistake this way. If, for instance, that you're using like a fork clamp, if it is a bigger tube, it will have a lower torque than a smaller one. And I took the clamping force from the E model DRZ and applied that to the next one up. And I have one of the bolts from my DR, which is still in a straight line, but you can actually see light through the middle of it, where it broke and started to twist apart, but then came out.
Oh, thank God it came out. It would be so obnoxious.
So I've kept it as a thing to remind me never
That's a good point,
make that mistake again, because you think it's the same bike, but the diameter of the forks makes a difference.
Many of these bikes too, you get, whether you have to buy one or you can just find it on the forum pages or the whatever's. Try to get a PDF, a
service manual,
something.
Not the owner's manual, the service manual, which the
that is
have.
a big difference. You need the service manual, and the really interesting thing about that is, someone who became a certified motorcycle mechanic and has learned to do all these things. 90% of it was reading the manual, the service manual. Mm-hmm. So if you know how to read,
that's the other thing. The service manual,
they are written for cavemen. They know we're kind of cavemen,
and they are literally
written very simply.
This part from this drawing and do this and do this and do this and do this. Do not do this. And then I'll have things like, this is one you use blue Loctite on. Make sure you don't do like it's all there. Really simple.
Now, I know we've probably gone a little longer, but we will ask you another thing here. Since we're bringing this up and we're telling people this, obviously for a lot of people, I think we're saying this to new riders, and they're probably going to get either used bikes or bikes that can be worked on. There are a lot of bikes today the manufacturers really don't seem to want you to work on. There's right to repair issues. I know over here in the United States, there's constantly there's people trying to get more laws passed about this, because there's a lot of manufacturers will just lock you out of things. I think there's a lot of bikes like the Ducati's very bad about. You buy a bike and it'll have a service thing that'll pop up on the dash, and even if you do the service yourself, they will not turn that off. Mm-hmm. You have to pay Ducati to turn that off, and then they'll void your warranty. I mean, do you think we need to be careful about avoiding bikes like that? I kind of think, I'll say my opinion real quick, I think as a community, we should avoid bikes like that. I think if we show these manufacturers we're not buying these bikes to do that. I know you're going to say the problem is right. The people that can afford them don't care, right?
No, I wasn't going to say that. I was saying the whole thing about not being able to touch your own bike while it's under warranty is the same for all brands. They don't want you doing any of the work. They want you to do the work. So I'm not really worried about...
Yeah, but warranty is not necessarily means they're doing free maintenance to your bike either, which is annoying, right?
No, well, that's the thing. When I had a warranty, it was like, it needs an oil change. It needs a service. It's going to need these things doing. They didn't specifically say I couldn't do an oil change in between, but it was forced to be so regular. Some of them definitely will not.
And there's a lot of them that will say, if you're going to maintain this warranty, you have to bring it to us.
But that's what I'm saying. If you've got a new bike, if you're going to... This is the thing. When I didn't actually keep my warranty going forever, because the whole point you get a warranty is we'll replace anything that goes wrong. I didn't think anything was going to go wrong that was going to cost the amount that it cost to keep having it serviced.
Everything went wrong.
And then, no, actually it was all right.
Was your DRZ that blew up not long after you got it, or was burning oil at an absurd rate?
It was burning oil, and then it was burning a lot of oil. It was burning about 1.5 quarts
more than
per
it normally should burn.
Now, be clear, the spec for the DRZ is 1 quart of oil per 1,000 miles burnt. Is within
insane.
spec. Is okay.
That's
Mine
crazy.
was one
That's
and a
within
half.
spec, but
So
yeah,
you know, so
you were out of spec.
So
I mean, that's also telling too, right? People assume just bring around your things you could do yourself. Your bike's oil should just be fine from oil change to oil change, but engines, new, old, perfect, wore out, burn oil. That is the nature of how they work. So occasionally checking your oil. I'm not saying you gotta do it every ride, but occasionally it's a good idea.
But no, so yeah, that's why. So then I had the big bore kit put on it because replacing the bore with Suzuki genuine parts was £1,300. Getting a 440 kit, forged pistons, all of that stuff was £300.
Yeah. This is why half the people just end up buying a 440 kit.
Did you choose that?
The cheapest way to rebuild it. Yeah. The other cheap way, unfortunately, gone away now is people would buy entire E models when their DRZ needed a new engine. Because for a long time over here in the States, you could buy an E model, like an old E model for like $2,000. This is before the market just went. Both I know our markets have gone insane now, and so people would buy an entire E model. And then they throw that engine in their DRZ, and as well as bring the cool carb over and the CDI and all the stuff that makes the E model a little bit more snappy. And they would.
Well, everyone turns the SM engine to an E anyway, so just.
That's what I did to mine eventually, yeah. But anyways.
Okay, well, we're not trying to scare people. It's just I think you'll find is we were very much like everyone else who may not feel comfortable fixing their own bikes, and just a few years of doing it, we're now these people who can't stop talking about hydrolocking bolts down holes and stuff.
I bought an R6 as my first bike, and I literally was I know what it's like. I was kind of terrified to work on it.
I will say,
but then really quickly it had problems, and I was like, wait a minute. If I don't fix them, it's not going to get fixed.
Getting my first 125 was really good for teaching me because it's not complicated. It's got one piston, it's got one this, one that. It's all accessible. And then when I bought my DR, it's the same thing, just a bigger hole in the middle.
And there's so many good starter bikes now, small bore bikes, whether you buy a Chinese one and you really throw yourself into the fire,
or you buy like you were saying, people said to me, oh, well, it breaks all the time. Well, I've learned. In owning that bike and paying out, a few £100s in parts over the years that I owned it, I've probably saved thousands in the lessons it taught me to fix bikes.
Exactly.
So when it came to something that was much more expensive, I'm like, oh, I can do that. Like fork seals and stuff.
And I think too, the whole Zen thing, people love riding motorcycles and they feel like it's therapy to them. I've kind of gotten that way with wrenching on the bikes, and I don't even try to do it so fast. I'm okay with taking hours to do something that should take 10, 15 minutes for one, because I just go out there and I'm doing things. Oh, I'm going to clean this while I'm in here. Well, let's check that out. Okay. And that's
age though, because if you it's also that slow is fast, because if you rush you tend to make mistakes and not think, you don't have the moments of I could have done it like that, it would have been so much easier. You tend to have that beforehand, and I think that's just
how many times too do you do a job and you see something also while you're in there and you're like, oh, I'd like to mess with that too, but I'll just do it another time. And then nowadays
it's a part
I'm like
it's a part.
It's just time.
It
was
like
just extra time.
When I had one bike and that was how I got to work or got around, then it was like, I need this to be fixed. And if I'm gonna fix all the bits and pieces that I know need fixing, it was kind of like, right, I'm not gonna have the bike this week, I'm gonna work on it. But now I have two bikes. I'm the same as you. I'm like, I'll do this bit and then I'll do that bit and then
So get a good don't be afraid getting your first bike to get something that's a little bit cheaper, a little bit, carbureted bikes these days, people are terrified of them. So the prices come down on some of those. I say some DRZs for some reason are still, worth more than
best motorcycle ever made. That's why I own one.
I guess, right?
And that's a joke to do in my last video, don't worry.
No, I got you. So, it's,
Okay.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. And if you've got any questions, you've got an entire community. You got me and Jake. You got both our communities, which are quite separate. It would be nice if you crossed over a little bit. It was nice to see, but a couple of people from your side of Discord come over into my side. I don't know if any people have returned the other way.
I think a few did. Yeah. Okay. So just jump back and forth in there, and let us ask you a question with questions. What the hell do we name this thing?
Yeah,
we still have not. We have not made
calling it the Unnamed Podcast.
Unless that just becomes the name.
Yeah, but that's like the Untitled Podcast.
But you and me, when we chat about this thing, it's always what should we talk about next, and then we fiercely agree on too many things, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think we kind of agree for the most part on this subject too, but we thought it was a cool subject to hear about. I think that's something else too. If you have any ideas on things you'd love to hear us chat about, things that you think that we would have an interesting perspective on, or might even fight each other.
I will say I'm fully open to it. It doesn't even have to be motorcycle related. I'll talk anything. We very often get into the weeds about all sorts of different...
or Kit Kat bar.
Well, Snickers, obviously.
Yeah, me too. See, we agree too many things. Okay.
Okay, thank you for watching, everyone. This video obviously is on my channel. The next one will be on Jake's channel. The first one is on Jake's channel. I think you've been able to work out now it's just going to jump backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So this one's on mine.
Now, we're not making a separate channel for this as much as people want us to.
No, because we
don't see any reason to do that.
There is, and also neither of us would gain anything from that, because by hosting it on our own channels, we can actually monetize it. Whereas if we put it on a new channel, we'd have to get that to the way of actually being able to get any money.
Such a mess, and it wouldn't. Yeah.
But the irony is, what if it went huge because it's a new channel and it's not an old cursed one like ours? You know what I'm talking about.
Yep. I don't know.
Have a YouTube channel too long? Like, oh, you're old.
We are old. We've
irrelevant.
Yeah. Get away. We're done with you. Smell funny.
All right. There we go. Thank you for watching, everyone. Bye bye.
Yep. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.